Okay, so we're on to the final agenda item, which is Q&A, except I want to leave a couple of minutes for a couple of announcements at the end. So now is your opportunity to ask questions. I've had a very eager hand up over there, George.
I've given you, sorry, it's Alex Feely. I've given you guys a couple of weeks heads up in terms of this question coming at you, but what's the policy and stance of the club on the London living wage? I remember it discussed a number of years ago by Nigel Higgs and championed by him, and the assurances I had at that stage was that it was going to be adopted, and it turns out it hasn't. So I was wondering if we do have a policy and what it is.
So our employees are paid the London living wage. Our direct employees are paid the London living wage.
No, they're not.
Okay.
So my daughter works here as hospitality on a match day. She is a direct employee. It says AFC Wimbledon at the bottom of her place ship, and she's not paid the London living wage. So cool. Start again.
Temporary staff aren't at the moment. Sorry, part-time then. So.
What's the full-time? What is full-time? 35 hours?
I don't know.
Yeah, 35 hours.
Okay, so I think what we said in the past, and if I'm completely honest, I'm trying to rack my memory, but we basically said that we moved all our direct employees on, and maybe, I don't know if the London living wage has overtaken what she's paid or whatever, but we said we would move all our direct employees onto that. We did at the time go through various exercises to make sure that that was the case, and we had to make some adjustments in some cases, and we had to actually, one of the difficult things we had to go through is working out exactly how you calculate the hours of some of the younger playing squad, for instance, to work out that they complied. So we went through that exercise, but then there was a question of, would we go for full accreditation? Would we work that through the supply chain? And particularly at the time when we were entering into the stadium contract, or doing the stadium, and where you got multiple layers of subcontractors in the construction.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt and bring my recollection, which is that my son Joe was working in the office, and that's when I think a lot of this got started in terms of the discussions, because he wasn't being paid that. So then that's when I got Nigel involved, and the commitment I was given by the club was that there was an issue with indirect employees, but that would be addressed as and when those contracts came up for renewal. But the other assurance I was given was that every club employee would be paid the London living wage. And that, that kind of satisfied me, because based on the club we are, the ethos we're supposed to have, and the level of commitment we have to the community that we're supposed to have, well, that's fair enough. As and when the contracts came up for renewal, they'd be reassessed. And then that would be taken into account. And we've gone backwards.
Okay. Well, I think we will need to remind ourselves where we got to. And to be fair, Alex, actually what you said, that does sound familiar. The question though was, when would we go for full accreditation? There's a question of what you actually pay, and then do you go for accreditation? And with where we were on the new stadium project, we decided that accreditation would be for another day, because no, it wasn't that long ago, and we did have but you are right, you are right, we said, right, so there's our direct employees, and then how do we work that through our supply chain, leaving that one monster aside. So we need to refresh where we are on that. Well, I think the answer is we did formulate a policy 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. So we need to remind ourselves what that policy is and where we are on it.
Okay, thank you.
So.
Colin Shergold again. Last year, I think it's fair to say we were fairly open about what the playing budget was. I think it was around about 2.1 million. Now, rumour has it that it's gone down this year by 10% or whatever. I understand if we want to sort of, keep our cards closer to the chest, keep our cards closer to our chest in future, but can you just clarify, are we open about what our playing budget is, and if so, what is it this year?
So, first of all, I think the answer is we can't have been open about it because it wasn't £2.1 million last year. But we're not open about it, and the reason we're not open about it is because actually when you're vying to sign players, then that affects your negotiating position. I do know that we were the 5th lowest in the league last season, which is kind of interesting in terms of what that tallies with, in terms of our eventual league position. It has gone down a bit. It has gone down somewhat this season, but we haven't published what that is. But we're giving the best budget we possibly can within financial sustainability. But that wasn't a number last season, and so I don't know where that number came from. So,
the budget this year is the same as it was the year before last. Yeah.
And where's that in our overall position in the league?
We don't know yet.
We won't know until the end of the season.
Not to the end of the season.
Sorry, I got the mic. Peter Bowles is my name. I want to raise the issue of the way in which our club currently relates to our most recent opposition, particularly in the light of the current possible mediation process that no one says anything about. Now, I assume that the Dons Trust Board is committed to a kind of non-disclosure agreement, and because as far as I'm aware, we haven't heard a peep on the subject. I assume it's because we're obliged by the process to keep stum. And obviously abiding by that sort of agreement is the right thing to do during the process. But it's my understanding that we won't be committed to any long-term agreement with how we deal with them until the resolution's been put to the Dons Trust members. So it's worth stating that one of the most insulting legacies of what happened in 2002 was the fact that it was all shrouded in secrecy. And none of those involved have ever been willing or able to comment on what happened. And we can't allow ourselves to be placed in that position this time in the current arbitration process, or whatever there is. So firstly, I'd like to ask the board to confirm that it is the case that any policy long-term will be put to the Dons Trust members as owners of the club. And secondly, I'd like to ask the Dons Trust board what they've done and what they plan to do to get input from Dons Trust members in order to inform our stance in negotiations that might be taking place. Finally, I just want to say that despite all that has been achieved by the Dons Trust and AFC Wimbledon in the last 17 years, when it comes to dealing with them, we still carry with us an open wound. And for our own sake, I think we need to do all that we can to fully recover, even if that involves a degree of cooperation with those who wounded us.
Okay, so sorry, thank you. There were a number of points there. So we have signed a non-disclosure agreement, which is, I think we've said that publicly. We did say last year that what emerges from that would be put to the membership. Now, depending on when, we said we put some weasel words about that because if we came up with absolutely nothing, there's nothing to put to the membership. But we did say that at the time. That was one board ago. It might be in another board's time that actually that conclusion, that process reaches a conclusion. So I've got nothing to update that position with, I'd say. Sorry, so that was the first point. The second point was, remind me.
Getting input from Dons Trust members as to how we feel. surveying opinion, because I respect the Don's Trust Board are all great people, but there's lots of us, and we probably have varied opinions.
So I think there is a danger that doing that could just inflame. You get, and I was at the meeting when we first announced that process, I think, and we had some very, very vocal people in the room, and we had some people who quietly sidled up to me afterwards and said, actually, they weren't speaking for me. So I think that we're trying to. We can't. It's so hard to do that negotiation with 3,000 voices at you. I think we're just, there are some things that are a more sensitive issue with members than others. I think we have a sense of what they are, but I think trying to sort of get input on what should our negotiating stance be, I think could just inflame things. I think the process we said last year was that we'll go in there. We are in a situation where, for whether we like it or not, behaving in a certain way has consequences for us in terms of penalties and sanctions, and ultimately even expulsion from the league. So we're not, and I didn't quite hear that. Sorry.
I said we can always do enough Bolton without not turning up for a game. You suggested we can get chucked out for not calling them what they are.
So ultimately, yeah, and on whom? So there are no. So whether we like it or not, they're not in non-compliance with anything.
Well, they are. They keep calling us AFC for a start.
Yeah. Well, some of our own staff members and fans call us AFC, and it's quite. I think they call us AFC Wimbledon on scoreboards or whatever, but. So it's going to be really hard to get member input and not inflame the situation. So that's why we said last year, I'm afraid we are going to do it in a way away from publicity, and what we said last year is we'd bring it back when we get it.
Tim Hillier, following Peter's point there, and recognising that Sean Harvey, the CEO of the Football League at the time, made it his top priority to remind us about respect, despite the fact that Bury were going under and Bolton were in big trouble, and we could add to that list on and on. And then Debbie Jevons, when appointed in June, one of the first things she did was, yet again, in an official EFL statement, remind us about respect. That we're in a situation now where we have a scoreboard out there that doesn't work. Chelsea have to fix that scoreboard or replace it because of their status in the Champions League for women's football. Can I ask Joe whether we're going to even bother asking whether we can use it, or do we just forget it because we have got a fixture due in April?
So actually, the new Chelsea scoreboard is likely to be up for the next game. The structure's all up there, the screen's over there as well, they just need to connect it up. So whether we'll actually be able to use it for the next game, I'm not totally sure, because that's another side of things. But it will be evident. If there's a working scoreboard, I think we would be required to use it. What we're hoping for, so I've had several conversations with Nick Craig about what the situation is with mediation. Nick Craig is the sort of legal counsel at the EFL, and himself and Debbie Jevons have taken on the task over from Sean Harvey for mediation. It is on their agenda. I could tell you that it's a very imminent board meeting that they have. And I'm hoping that from that we'll get feedback of the next steps and the next stage of mediation. So it is still live. We hope that by the time we come to the return leg here, that we will have gone through that process. That's where we are. So we hope that things are tied up. What I can say is that following the Carabao Cup match, the EFL were very satisfied with the way that we conducted ourselves, given the guidelines and requirements that they set us. So from that basis, there is no further recourse against us. So we are in a good position for mediation now. So let's see, hopefully, over the next couple of months, we'll see some movement on that.
Okay, we are nearly at 10 o'clock, so I'm going to take two more questions, and then I'm sorry, but we're going to need to wrap it up. So,
Hi, Colette Mulcrone. Really following up what Tim was talking about, our serial basket cases in this division. Firstly, Bury. Now, it's been reported, don't know if it's true or not, that the Football League clubs are being asked to vote on whether they should be allowed back into League Two next season. Ludicrous, obviously. But how will the Dons Trust be instructing our club to vote? Do we have any say in it? And as a follow-up with Bolton, when are the Football League actually going to decide whether they get points deductions for the 2 matches that they refused to turn up for?
So on Bury, it's just not an issue we've discussed today. At least I missed the last board meeting because I was at a Cedars event. So we haven't discussed it. Good question. We should work out what the Football League is going to ask clubs and work out our stance. So good prompt. Do you want to say something about that?
So there's a league meeting on the 26th of this month, and whilst we haven't received the agenda, it's pretty clear that the majority of that meeting is going to be the discussion about Bolton. Obviously it's a very complex situation. So in terms of their decision, I think they're waiting to have that all club meeting on the 26th. I don't know whether they're going to vote at that day. They haven't stated that. I think they're going to want to try and gauge opinion from breakout groups. But obviously it's something that currently is unfair to us. I think that's very clear. Having had discussions with quite a few different clubs and also the manager, they've put themselves into a very difficult situation now. Realistically, the only thing they can do is to offer everyone 3 points. It's all they could do, and the 5 goal difference points as well. Yeah. It's going to be very difficult for them to sort out. So what I will do is when we've had that meeting, then if I'm able to, I will feed that back, because I know it's something that's of interest to all of you as well. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, we've got one last question. You've both had a couple actually, but go on.
Okay, so sorry, Peter Godfrey again. Regarding our management team, and it's not about vote of confidence, because in Wally and Glyn we trust to get us out of this again. I read in the summer that Glyn Hodges had signed a contract for I think 2 years, which I was pleased about, but I was also worried to read in the same article that he was working then on a month-by-month contract because his family is still in the north. Is he and Wally both now on the same commensurate contract base? Because obviously as a management team we saw what happened with the Cowley brothers today going to Huddersfield. So I just wanted to know, clarify about where Wally and Glyn both stand on their contract situations. Thanks.
So they're not on like a termed contract, so it's not for like two years or 3 years or 4 years like that, simply because we just wouldn't be able to afford the cost if they needed to go. So it's a permanent ongoing contract, like a normal employment contract. No, so they
Season by season?
effectively, yes.
So there's
Yeah.
notice period?
No, so no. In a sense, yes, it's monthly, like you said, I guess. So it's ongoing. It's an ongoing contract. It's not over a fixed term for 1 year or 2 years or 3 years.
Just so I'm clear,
Mm.
if someone approached them, like Lincoln,
Mm.
they could go in a month,
In theory, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
and we'd have no compensation.
Yes, we would. We would.
Only for a month though, isn't it?
No. They've got longer terms in their contract. Yeah, we have that covered. So if someone does approach them, we would get the money for that. And also, again, if they move upwards, so a division upwards, we get more. So, yeah.
Quick question.
Okay. Go on, one last question.
Yeah, it's Andy Ramsden again. Comes from his son, who can't be here. But he's asked me to ask you, how do the Dons Trust Board feel about us getting relegated, given the scenario that's the likely scenario based on our season start?
So it's not a conversation the Dons Trust Board has had. There are probably 9 or 10 different opinions among the Dons Trust Board. I'm a fan. I don't want to get relegated. So I don't know. How do other board members feel?
I feel the same here.
They don't want to get relegated either.
So is there any influence we can have, or that you can have, on the performance that's gone so far?
So, like how?
Budget increase? To get,
So-
that target man that we need up front, something like that.
So in budget increase, it's you sometimes hear this expression, why won't the board open their wallets and things like that. It's your wallets we open. We've opened it to the extent that we are running a loss this season. We ran at a loss last season, and there's only so much loss you can sustain.
That's the answer I'm looking for. So don't go any more further. That's fine.
Okay, all right. Well, so thank you for those questions. So I've got a few AOBs, all from Jane, actually. But so first of all, she asked me to update you on the work of the Diversity Inclusion Group. They're going to Football Supporters Association Awards and Conference later this month. They're working on the dates for a screening of a film called Wonder Kid, which is about a gay footballer. And they're working on another Women at the Game Day. If you remember, we had one of those last season. Secondly, the Junior Dons were working on a date for a Christmas party. They've agreed a work plan for that, and they brought on board some volunteers to help with that and with the gifts that the Junior Dons get, and the 12 to 16-year-old membership offer. And finally, she asked me to remind you that there's going to be a food bank on the 21st of September. So those are AOBs from Jane who had to go at the break. Any other AOBs that Dons Trust Board members wish to raise? In that case, no. It's 10:05. I failed you. Sorry about that. Thank you very much for coming. Good discussion, good questions as always. See you at the next one, if not at the next home match.
Thank you. Well done, Mark.